Hey, I don't have any sort of witty intro for this video, so I'm probably just gonna cut right to the chase. Um, I've played a lot of Metroid Dread, both the main game and randomizers, and I've even uploaded a randomizer on my channel before. So today, I just thought to myself, why not make a tier list about the items and how much I like them? And, well, that's exactly what I'm gonna be doing here. This tier list is going to be based on a couple factors. So the first one is how much I enjoy using the power-up, so like how much fun I have with it in both the overworld and in combat. The second is how useful the power-up is, and its longevity relative to the time and area you obtain it. So like how long you get to use it before it ends up becoming replaced or upgraded by another item you obtain later on. And the third is just going to be some miscellaneous stuff like how it looks or how it sounds. So, without further ado, let's just go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first item I'm going to be looking at, and the first item you obtain in the game, is right here, the Charge Beam. So, Charge Beam, Charge Beam's a pretty classic item. This is the first power-up you acquire in the game, the first major item you acquire in the game, around, I think, halfway through exploring Artaria for the first time, when you start the game. Its power is pretty quickly demonstrated between uncharged and charged variants. So, like, when you first come across your enemies in Artaria, they take a few charge shots to kill. Not too many, but also not too little either. A little bit of a balance. But once you get the Charge Beam, you can start obliterating these enemies in one shot because the Charge Beam just does that much damage when you use it. It's a pretty useful item throughout pretty much the entire game. It's always serving as a missile substitute whenever you run out of those, which can be useful for damaging bosses that otherwise can't be damaged by just spamming your regular beam. So it always has uses in bosses and combat situations. It opens charge shot doors. It's used for pushing these wide beam blocks. So even in traversing and going through the world, it has some uses there as well. But its novelty does kind of wear off a little bit after acquiring the Plasma Beam, for reasons that I'll get to once we get to Plasma Beam. But even though it does kind of fall off towards the end of the game, when you acquire stronger and more useful powers, it's still fairly usable, even in the endgame. So, it still has some use there, but it's mainly supposed to be like an early game to mid game to early late game item. But then once you get the Plasma Beam and some other strong upgrades, you don't really need to use it as much, but you can obviously still use it. And I just think it's a fairly fun power-up in general, so I'm probably gonna put it in A tier. So next power-up is... where is it? Spider Magnet. So Spider Magnet is the first power-up that you acquire from an Emmy. You get Spider Magnet from defeating the Spider Magnet Emmy in Artaria. And see, the thing about Spider Magnet is, like, it's technically not a new ability. Like, its name kind of implies that it's a new ability, but at the same time it's not, because it's kind of just a repurposed mechanic from Metroid Fusion, like the ladder climbing and stuff. But it's been a little expanded upon, because now you can climb diagonally as opposed to just up, down, or left and right. It's a pretty neat power-up at first, but it kind of loses purpose once you get upgrades like the Speed Booster, the Flash Shift, and Space Jump. It's only really useful for a specific part of the game, which is basically just the early game. And then after that, it's only useful for activating these electromagnetic elevators and doors and stuff. That's really about it. But once you do use it for like the first time, it is a pretty fun power-up. So I think I'll put it in B tier for now, because it's fun when you get it. It's pretty useful for the early game, but other than that, it's really nothing special, honestly. Alright, so next up is the Phantom Cloak. So, Phantom Cloak is a new ability in the Metroid series. It's the first power-up that you get from an actual boss. You get it from beating Corpius, and it's also the first of the 3 Aeon abilities that are present in this game. Now, the Phantom Cloak, it's a cool concept, don't get me wrong. Like, going invisible is a pretty cool concept in an action-adventure game or a Metroidvania game. But the way they did it in this game is, like, it's very gimmicky, and it's pretty obviously designed for it to be used in the Emmy zones alone. But if you're someone who's like replaying the game, or you're someone who's like intimately familiar with the controls or can get used to the controls super quickly, it's kind of a redundant power-up because you're gonna be more than capable of just breezing through these Emmy zones without the Phantom Cloak's help. Because you're gonna know, like, where to go, you're gonna know how to evade the Emmy, you're gonna be able to just go right through without needing to use the Phantom Cloak whatsoever. And then on top of that, it doesn't really have any, like, practical uses outside of the Emmy zones. Like, obviously it has some use by being able to just walk by enemies without them being able to see you, but that's not really a good use because you can also just kill the enemies that get in your way. And most of the enemies are gonna be on the ground regardless, so, like, what's the point of trying to sneak by? And, like, the only other use that Phantom Cloak has outside of the Emmy zones is to get past the sensor lock doors that will shut whenever you're trying to go through them without using Phantom Cloak. But other than using it in the Emmy zones and the sensor lock doors, there's literally no use for the Phantom Cloak whatsoever. I mean, if you're a first-time player, it's useful. I won't deny that, but it's like, I just don't really see a whole lot of use for it outside of the Emmy zones if you're a first-time player and activating the sensor lock doors, but those are required, so I think I'm just gonna put this one in not very fun, honestly. I just realized I had these 2 tiers mixed up. I'm gonna put this one in D tier. I don't think it's very fun at all. Okay, next up is Wide Beam. So Wide Beam is the second, well, technically it'd be the first, but like, I'm just gonna say it's the second beam upgrade that you acquire in the game. So Wide Beam, beyond just, you know, making your beam more vertical and letting you hit smaller enemies, it does more damage, both charged and uncharged. With Charge Beam, you use it to open Wide Beam doors and push Wide Beam blocks aside. But other than that, it's as basic as a Spazer upgrade kind of comes. Like, it's cool and fun to use at first, like, you know, having 3 shots from a beam instead of just 1. It's pretty nice and pretty fun to use at first. But it just becomes kind of standard as you go on, and you'll barely even notice that you have it until you come across something like a Wide Beam door or a Wide Beam block, since it's going to be required to use the Wide Beam to progress. And, you know, that's not to say, like, its only use is that. Obviously, it's got uses in both combat and traversal, but other than that, it's like, I mean, it's just as bog standard as a Spazer upgrade comes. That's basically it. So I think I'm just gonna put it in B tier. I might move it down to C tier, depending on what else goes in B tier, but for now I'm just gonna keep it in B tier. I think that's a good spot for it for the time being. Alright, the next item on the list is Morph Ball. So, Morph Ball, also another really classic upgrade. You get it in Cataris after you beat the Morph Ball Emmy, One thing that I kind of like about this iteration of the Morph Ball is that, unlike previous games, you know, like Super Metroid and Metroid Fusion, Morph Ball and Spring Ball are merged into one, so once you get the Morph Ball upgrade, you pretty much already have access to Spring Ball, which lets you jump while in Morph Ball form, which is pretty nice, you know? You don't have to go out of your way to get an entirely different power-up in order to just jump in your Morph Ball form. It also works really well with the newly introduced slide. You can slide through a small gap and then go into Morph Ball form, and it's especially cool because it maintains your sliding speed while in Morph Ball form, which I think is a pretty nice addition. And it also arrives at like the perfect time, because when you start the game out, you don't have the Morph Ball, unlike in a lot of games where the first power-up you get is literally the Morph Ball. In this game, it comes a little later, but I think that's actually a good thing, because it allows people to have fun with the slide and experiment with the slide first, until they reach specific roadblocks that require the use of the Morph Ball. And then they're like, oh wait, I gotta go find the Morph Ball, where's that at? And then, once you eventually get it, you're like, yes, I can finally do stuff now. So, I honestly think that's like, I think the Morph Ball in this game is really well designed. I especially like the look of the Morph Ball in this game. It's got like a really nice, sleek, like pinball-esque look. It's really cool. So I think this is a pretty rightful A-tier item. I just think it's a really cool and fun ability. It's a lot. I think it's pretty much perfectly done in this game. Like, out of all the Metroid games, I think this game is the game that does it the best. Alright, next up, we have, where is it? Varia Suit. So, Varia Suit. This thing is awesome, honestly. You get it in Artaria once you return to it with Morph Ball in tow. It has a few functions. It first decreases the amount of damage you take from enemies, which is obviously very nice. The main thing is that it insulates you from heated rooms, which means you can explore rooms that were previously too hot for you to go into, as the game explains to you at some point. I forgot where. I might show footage of that, but yeah, they explain to you that some rooms are too hot for you to explore and that you should avoid those whenever possible. And the third thing, it's fairly minor, but the third thing is that it increases the amount of damage that your melee dash does. So whenever you're running and you hit the counter button, you'll do a dash attack, and having the Varia Suit on will make that do a little more damage, which is pretty neat, honestly. It looks awesome, like, I gotta say, it looks awesome as fuck. Like, it's probably the best Varia Suit design in the whole series, at least in my opinion. I love this design so much. And the cool thing about it, no pun intended, like, the cool thing about it is that they instantly let you try it out. Like, once you get the Varia Suit, they direct you to a heated room that basically shows you that you can actually walk through these areas now after you just acquired it, and gives you a pretty sick before and after. Like, beforehand, you were too hesitant to go into these heated rooms because they would do so much damage to you over time. But now you can explore them no problem. Like, you can get all of the goodies in here, you can see what sort of puzzles they have to offer and all that. So I think for that reason, I'm going to put Varia Suit up in at least B tier, like, at the very least B tier. The thing about the Varia Suit, in my opinion, is that, like, kind of like the Wave Beam, is that it just kind of becomes standard to you. Like, once you realize, oh hey, I can go through heated rooms because of this thing, you understand, oh hey, I can do this, and it becomes basically part of the standard adventure. Like, it becomes super standard, and you basically don't even think about it at all. Okay, so next on the list is Diffusion Beam. So Diffusion Beam, a lot of people might think that this is a completely new ability to Metroid, but it was actually featured in Other M first. Like, Other M was the first game to have Diffusion Beam. But let's be honest, nobody really gives a shit about Other M. Everyone, Like, everyone remembers Diffusion Beam because of Metroid Dread, so... Diffusion Beam, you get this in Caterus after you defeat Kraid, which is after you get Varia Suit, so I think that's a pretty cool way to get a new power-up. What it does is, when you shoot a charge shot at a wall, it will kind of explode into different smaller bursts of energy, and what that means, besides it doing a little more damage than your regular charge shots, is that it kind of serves as like a semi-substitute for the wave beam, because it pierces a little bit of walls. So like, if you shoot a diffusion charge shot at a wall, it'll explode, and then parts of that explosion will go into the walls, so you can hit stuff that's in the walls. Like, they actually show this off, which is honestly really cool. But the unfortunate thing about Diffusion Beam is that it's not really used for a whole lot of puzzles that progress you through the game, because not a whole lot of puzzles really require its use in the first place. I think the main thing that I remember the Diffusion Beam for, like in terms of puzzles, is you use it to get through a specific part in Varia in order to get to the gravity suit. Like, that's what I remember it for, mainly. But I still think it's a pretty fun power to use until you get Wave Beam, which, at that point, it completely trivializes Diffusion Beam's use. But, you know, I still think that's fine. Like, you know, it's with you for a pretty large portion of the game. It's got its uses in both combat and traversing the world. It's got some pretty nice sound design on it. I like its visuals as well, like the energy exploding all around where you first make contact with the charge shot. I think it's pretty nice, but obviously it doesn't have a whole lot of uses in puzzle situations. So I think I'm going to put it in B tier for now. Okay, the next power-up is bombs, or as the item tracker would call it, Morph Bomb. I think that's a pretty funny name. So bombs, you know, bombs are another pretty classic item, you know. They allow you to destroy small sections of the map. So you get these in Dyren after you activate the second power generator. So there's something new to Dread. There are these Morph Ball tunnels that you can only go through by using bombs. So like, if you try to go into them normally, they don't work, but if you use them with a bomb, you'll be sent through them, and honestly, they're always a thrill to go through. Like, you get shot in and out at like super high speeds. Being able to go through these super fast is always just really fun, honestly. And just like in Super Metroid and Zero Mission, infinite bomb jumping is back, you know, and the timing is actually pretty easy, I would say. I don't think it's as easy as Zero Mission, but it's pretty easy. I'd say it's easier than Super Metroid, in my opinion. So like, there's a perfect balance. And then, what I think is the coolest part about the bombs in this game is that there's an awesome intentional sequence break Easter egg where if you get the bombs early, I think you do some sort of like slide jump technique in Dyren or something like that. I don't know, but you do some sort of like slide jump technique, and you can use the bombs to get a quick kill on Kraid's second phase, where there's a Morph Ball tunnel hidden in the wall. You destroy the initial wall with bombs. You go into the tunnel, and then you shoot yourself into Kraid's stomach where you just spam bombs and explode his insides. It's awesome, and I love that the developers knew that players could sequence break that and added it as an Easter egg to a boss fight. That is so cool. I love that. But the main detractor from bombs for me is that it's mainly just an exploration tool. Like, in terms of combat, their impact is really, really minuscule. Like, you're not going to be using these things to try and kill a boss unless you're doing the quick kill on Kraid. Like, you're not going to be doing that. They just do too little damage, they're too hard to actually hit on a boss, and it's just like, you're risking taking damage in favor of just laying back and smacking the boss with charge beams and missiles. But that Easter egg alone, man, that quick kill Easter egg alone just brings it up so much for me. I think I'm gonna put it in... I think I'll put it in A tier, because that Easter egg alone just does so much heavy lifting. Which isn't to say that, like, using bombs outside of that is, like, boring or not fun. Like, it's still pretty fun to, like, bomb places and explore areas that you didn't think you'd be able to find without them. But that Easter egg is just... mwah, it's just so good. I love it so much. It's amazing. Now next... oh man. This power right here, Flash Shift, I'm just gonna put it right in S tier. I love the Flash Shift so much. So Flash Shift is the second Aeon ability that you ever get in this game. You get it in Berenia, about near the end of your first visit to it, I'd say. But this... oh man, this is probably the single most fun and intuitive power in the whole game, at least in my opinion. And it might also be the single most, like, impactful power-up in the whole series. You can debate me on that, I don't mind, because, like, obviously discussion is very key to having an opinion. But I just think this thing is so impactful for the whole game. Like, not only is it great in combat scenarios where you gotta, like, where you're seeing an attack and you gotta move out of the way quickly, it's just such a great traversal tool in general. It makes you go much faster than you normally would with your regular running speed. Like, it's so good. It allows you to get to further away ledges that you wouldn't be able to reach otherwise with, like, just a single wall jump or whatever. You could get there with, like, probably IBJ or whatever, but that's so much slower than just using Flash Shift to get over there. It's so good. It's amazing. Its sound design and visuals are also really good. It really emphasizes the speed at which Samus is moving when you use this. It's called Flash Shift. Like, you shift in a flash. That's basically the whole thing. And yet, a simple dash that you can use 3 times in one go is just so impactful and it's so good. I love this ability so much. And that's not even all. If you manage to get this early, it has a similar functionality to bombs. Well, not necessarily similar, but like, it has a secret use in Kraid's second phase. If he's about to punch you, I think, or if he just has his mouth open in general, you can Flash Shift into his mouth to hold it open and deal extra damage by lodging missiles down his mouth. It's so cool. I love this shit so much. This is instant S tier. Like, this is probably the best ability in the game. I can't even stress how much I love this. Okay, moving on from my fanboying about Flash Shift, we have another amazing power that's also an instant S tier. The Speed Booster. Now, Speed Booster. You get this in Dairen after you beat the Speed Booster Emmy, and honestly, like, I don't know, I'm having a tough time deciding between Flash Shift or Speed Booster as my favorite ability in the game. Using it, like, to go through the world and the environment, like, destroying all the enemies in your way, and maintaining the speed boost through, like, wall jumps, slides, and Morph Ball usage is, like, it's so much fun just being able to blitz through all of these worlds and all of these environments. The Shine Spark returns in this, and instead of having 5 directions in which you can shoot yourself in, it's got 8 ways. You can go down, and then down in both diagonal directions. So you now have an 8-way Shine Spark as opposed to 5. And I think that just makes it so much more fun to use, in my opinion. There's a bunch of puzzles relating to Speed Booster, and I think all of them are super unique. But they're also challenging at times to where, like, you can do them, like, going through them for the first time is not an easy task, but once you figure out how to maintain your speed, it's awesome. It's so much fun, and I love the puzzles. And even the Shine Spark has some puzzles related to it. Like, I think there's a YouTube video out there relating to some of the more difficult Shine Spark puzzles in this game, and all of them are so much fun to do. I don't think they're as difficult as Zero Mission's Shine Spark puzzles, but they're still difficult, and they're so much fun to do. And it feels so rewarding when you get to pull it off as well. I love it. Even in combat scenarios, like in bosses and stuff, you can use the Speed Booster and Shine Spark. Granted, you have a big enough arena to do it, but like, even still, it's so good. You can use it against these, like, the Chozo robots. You can use it against, like, SQ. I remember you can Shine Spark into SQ and it'll do some pretty good damage. You can use it against Galzuna. You can use it... I don't know if you can use it against the Chozo Warriors, but I wouldn't be surprised if you could. It's just... I love this ability so much. It's so fun to use, it's got a lot of applications, the puzzles relating to it are so much fun to do, they're so intuitive. Man, I really want to put it above Flash Shift, but I don't know. This is so hard to me. I'll keep it at second place for now. I'm really tempted to put it here, but I think for now I'll keep Flash Shift at the top and then Speed Booster at a super close second place. Like, oh man, I don't know. Alright, anyways. Alright, now that I'm done gushing about my two favorite abilities in the whole game, let's move on to the next one, which is Grapple Beam. So Grapple Beam, it's got a little bit of history. It was first featured in Super Metroid, and needless to say, it was a little wonky, but you know, it was unique, I'll give them that. But it's got a little bit of extra functionality in this game, where if you grapple onto the blue magnetic surfaces, you'll actually fly over to them and grab onto them like you would with Spider Magnet. Which I think is a pretty neat addition, you know? It adds some functionality to an otherwise fairly generic platforming and exploration tool. Just like in Samus Returns, there's some blocks that you can pull on with it to either destroy or move out of the way for progression's sake. It doesn't have a whole lot of combat functionality like it did in Super Metroid, where you could just zap smaller enemies and it would instantly kill them. But it does have a niche use in the Chozo Warrior fights, where you can pull on their shields and tear them away so that way they don't have their defense against your beam attacks anymore, which I think is a pretty neat addition. But other than that, there's really not much use for it. I mean, it's required to get into some places, but other than that, it's got basically just niche uses. It doesn't even have that much puzzle usage either, it's mainly just for exploration. So I think for that reason, I'm gonna just put it in... I think I'll put it in... C tier, I guess? Because, like... no, I'll put it in B tier. Swinging on it is actually pretty fun. I like building up momentum in order to get to the other side. Kind of like how you did in Super Metroid and the other games. And looking at it, I'm probably going to bring Wide Beam down to C tier as well, because I think these four abilities, Spider Magnet, Varia Suit, Diffusion Beam, and Grapple Beam, I think all of them are much more fun than Wide Beam. So, Wide Beam, C tier, Grapple Beam goes into B tier. Alright, moving on, the next item we have is Super Missiles.
Motherfucking Super Missiles!
So Super Missiles, just like the Grapple Beam, they originate from Super Metroid, which, you know, Super Missiles, Super Metroid, I feel like that's a pretty obvious naming convention. You get these in Gavaron when you first visit the place, and the main purpose of Super Missiles is just more powerful missiles. And I think they nailed the concept of more powerful missiles pretty well in this game, because Super Missiles, not only do they just deal more damage than your regular missiles in general, but they just feel extremely powerful too. Like, they shake the screen on impact, and they have a hard-hitting sound effect with a different explosion compared to the regular missile. And just lobbing bosses and enemies with Super Missiles feels so great sometimes. But besides that, it really doesn't have much use besides destroying these specific super missiles doors that you come across. They're like the green pads that you come across when you're trying to go through a door. I mean, I don't really know what else to say about the super missiles, because, like, they're pretty basic. More powerful missiles that feel extremely powerful, so I think I'm just gonna put it in B tier. Because, like, yeah, the novelty of it does kind of wear off once you start using it for more than a couple minutes, but I think it's still a pretty fun power to use, personally speaking. Alright, after the super missile is an item that I think I enjoy a bit more than most people tend to do, and that's the Plasma Beam. So the Plasma Beam you get in a Lun after you discover the X-Parasites and you explore through the facility for a little bit. Just like super missiles, you know, it's an upgrade to your beam, a very powerful upgrade to your beam at that, and you can definitely feel how powerful it is because of how fast enemies die when you use it. And, you know, watching bosses melt under the damage of the Plasma Beam is always a treat, in my opinion. Its sound design and overall look gives it like a bit of an acidic feel, you know, the green color scheme and the way it just pierces through enemies. It kind of gives that, like, acidic, toxic feel, which I think is honestly to its benefit, because, you know, plasma is more likely associated with stuff like heat and phasing through stuff, so having that sort of property, I think, adds to its overall flavor. Though one thing I don't really like about it is how it kind of just replaces the charge beam when you realize that spamming the regular plasma beam is a faster method of dealing with enemies than using the charge beam. I'll probably show like a comparison on screen at some point, but spamming the plasma beam just does so much more damage per second than using the charged plasma beam shots does, and it's kind of a shame because charge beam, you really can't replace charge beam in my opinion, but the fact that this kind of does is very, like, upsetting to me because I love the charge beam and I love using charged plasma shots because they just sound so impactful and so, like, disintegrate-y, kind of. So that is one knock against the plasma beam that I have, but other than that, I think this is a really well done power. And I think I'm going to put it in A tier. I just love destroying enemies with this thing. Alright, next up on the list is a power that I'm surprised we didn't get earlier than Dread, the Spin Boost. So the Spin Boost, you get this in Gavaron after freeing the X-Parasites from a Lun, and this is as basic a power-up as it comes. It's just a double jump. You know, a double jump. We've had infinite jump power-ups in the Metroid series before, i.e. the space jump, but we haven't actually gotten a double jump before, which, you know, is honestly kind of strange. You'd think that they add a double jump power-up before an infinite jump power-up, but here we are. But other than the fact that it's a double jump, it's really nothing particularly special. The thing that really sucks about the Spin Boost, in my opinion, is that it's replaced by the Space Jump a little too soon after you acquire it, which really doesn't give you too much time with a double jump before you just get infinite jumps anyways. There's really just not much use for it outside of just being a quality of life addition, so I think for that reason it's just gonna go in C tier. Like, I love that they added the double jump. I think they should have just added it way, way, way earlier though, so that way you can actually play around with it for a bit before you end up getting Space Jump. It's kind of a shame that they ended up giving you Space Jump afterwards, but you know what? It is what it is, I guess. Alright, moving on from the Spin Boost, we have a fairly harmless and kind of simple power-up, the Ice Missile. So the Ice Missile was a power-up that first originated in Metroid Fusion, where I think it was at its best there, actually. But that's just me, personally. You get the Ice Missile in Gavaron after defeating the Ice Missile Emmy after they're reactivated by an X-Parasite controlling Quiet Robe. So the Ice Missile, you know, they function just like the Ice Missiles from Metroid Fusion, which means that they're basically only used for platforming and puzzle solving more than they're used in combat. But that doesn't mean they can't be used in combat, though I will say the only thing that they have in terms of combat application is that they just do a little bit more damage than your standard super missiles do. Outside of that, they don't really have any sort of like gimmicks in terms of combat. It just kind of freezes stuff, which you can then use as like platforms, and that's about it. I do like the sound design of it, admittedly. You know, the sound design of the ice missiles is pretty nice, but personally speaking, I kind of prefer how crunchy and powerful the ice missiles in Fusion sounded. Which goes the same way for the super missiles, but I didn't really mention it there because I think the sound design for the super missiles is actually better than the sound design for the ice missiles in this game. So, ice missiles. I think I'll put them in B tier alongside super missiles, because they're kind of just the same thing, except ice missiles has a bit more functionality for platforms and stuff, because it freezes enemies and platforms, so I think there's a little more to be had with the exploration for ice missiles, but other than that, these are basically just the same thing, so let's just move on to the next one. Alright, next up on the list, it's this thing, Pulse Radar. I don't really like this thing, honestly. You get it in Galvaron at some point. I honestly don't remember where you get it, but personally speaking, this is the single most boring and probably the least used power in the whole game, like, bar none. I think this is just such a boring ability. The most you're gonna get out of this, like, in actuality, is the section that shows you how to use it. Like, you get the power-up, it tells you how to use it, and then you use it, but then after that, you're never gonna use it again. I get why they added it. It's so that people actually, like, know where they should be breaking blocks. I get that. But, honestly, like, its only other use is for 100%, but you can still get by without using it. Like, I've done that before. I've gotten 100% items without even using the Pulse Radar once. There's really not much use for it, even if you're, like, going for 100%, because if you're a seasoned Metroid player, you already know that there's going to be a bunch of tips and tricks laying around the world for you, so that way you can just get them without the need for Pulse Radar. I'm just... D tier. I don't like this one. This is not fun at all. This is the most boring ability in the game for me. Alright, so after the disappointment that was the Pulse Radar, we have another new power-up. The Storm Missile. Well, it's technically not a new power-up, it's actually a rebranded Seeker Missile from Prime 2, but it's pretty much the exact same thing, but, you know, triple the missiles. And I think it's a pretty fun one to use, actually. It's got good use in bosses, you know, it's a pretty nasty weapon to use, at least from my experiences. It seems like this thing is pretty capable of tearing bosses apart. I actually don't know what the damage values are, but from what I've seen, it's pretty high, and it seems to take care of bosses relatively quickly. But other than that, I mean, it's just kind of, you know, pretty basic, I'd say. Though I will say that it using 3 missiles per shot is a bit resource draining, but I think if you have like 120, maybe 130 missiles or so, you can use this multiple times and you'll be fairly set. But other than that, there's really not much else I want to say about this. It's just kind of, you know, I'll put it in B tier. It's just a solid, fun, unique, and powerful ability. Alright, so next up on the list, we have the lovable and classic Space Jump. So, Space Jump. So you get the Space Jump on your way out from Ferenia after defeating Eskew and getting the Storm Missile. People who are familiar with the Metroid series already know Space Jump is an infinite jump ability, and I think in this game it's probably the best it's ever felt, because the timing on it isn't as wonky and as clunky as previous games, like Super Metroid for example. The Space Jump just doesn't want to work sometimes. Other times it'll work, but there are just times where it'll straight up fail, and you'll just plummet to the bottom of a pit when you don't want to, all because you mistimed your button presses. Something completely new to the Metroid series, as far as I'm aware, at least in 2D, is that you can actually use the Space Jump underwater for the first time since its introduction. But the only problem is that it won't go past the height of your highest jump. So you kind of just stay at the same height over and over again, but that's still pretty good for exploration because it means you can get to areas that you weren't able to previously get to before because you weren't able to jump high or far enough without the Space Jump. And that's obviously required to get through Barenia because you can't get through Barenia without it. and having it be useful underwater is honestly a pretty refreshing and new way to make the space jump more mechanical. Though I will say that, like I said in the spin boost section, it does kind of replace the spin boost a bit too early in my opinion. So, you know, that does knock it down a bit, but other than that, Space Jump is still a really fun and classic item, so I think kind of like Storm Missile and Ice Missiles, it's gonna go in B tier. I think it's pretty solid. I don't think it's quite A tier because of the fact that you get it so late, or not so late, but so early after acquiring the spin boost, but, you know, Space Jump, you're not bad. I like you. Alright, we're entering the last 5 items of the game, and first up, we've got the Gravity Suit. So the Gravity Suit, you get this in the lower parts of Barenia on your way to Artaria, which is after you acquire the Space Jump and you use it to get across the underwater sections of Barenia. Gravity Suit, I'm sure a lot of you already know what it does, but what it does is essentially allows you to move around in water and lava at normal speed. But there's a little bit of difference between the Gravity Suit in this game and the Gravity Suit in previous games. Whereas in this game, the Gravity Suit actually insulates you from cold. In previous games, it was the Varia Suit that did that for you. Most notably in Metroid Fusion, because Samus is now infused with Metroid DNA, meaning she's more exposed to the cold and it kind of kills her. But the Varia Suit did that just fine in Metroid Fusion, whereas in this game, the Varia Suit doesn't do that. For what reason? I don't know, but it's kind of weird. The main thing about this is that it allows you to move underwater at full speed, which I think is amazing, and especially in this game where the controls are so smooth, and, you know, for Barenia in particular, you're underwater for so long, having an immediate before and after comparison makes it so much fun to use, and it especially lets the Space Jump be used to its full potential because you can now start climbing underwater with the Space Jump. The design of the Gravity Suit is honestly sick as hell. It's probably my favorite Gravity Suit design in the series, kind of like the Varia Suit, but I do prefer the Varia Suit's design more than the Gravity Suit. That's just a me thing, but I think the Varia Suit just looks absolutely perfect. The Gravity Suit's still great, don't get me wrong, but Varia's design is just absolutely beautiful. The thing about this power-up, the Gravity Suit, is similarly to like the Varia Suit in the Wide Beam that I mentioned way earlier, is that it kind of just becomes second nature, which means that once you get used to traveling underwater and under lava at normal speed for a little bit, it kind of just loses the luster that the experience of moving full speed underwater when you first acquire it had. It's like, it just kind of loses its shine, and that's all I really have against it. But so, I'm gonna put this one in A tier. I think the Gravity Suit is a solid, pretty easy A tier in my opinion. It's so much fun to use, its design is amazing, the acquisition sequence especially looks gorgeous, I love that. And I think that the fact that it also insulates you from the cold, allowing you to explore colder areas and more areas like that, like the cold area in Dyron after you turn on the power, I think that's really neat. I think it's a great way to give players a chance to re-explore some of the areas that they couldn't. Alright, so the next item on the list is a bit of a curveball if you're someone who's familiar with the Metroid series and the way that you get power-ups. We have the Screw Attack. And I say that because the Screw Attack is usually the last item you get as an upgrade in the Metroid games. Like in Super Metroid, for example, the Screw Attack is the last item you get in the game from an item sphere, and in Metroid Fusion, it's the last item you get from a Core X that's actually, like, given to you as an item and not just some sort of temporary power-up, like it's an actual part of your kit. But in this game, it's actually the fourth to last upgrade, which kind of breaks away from the usual tradition of the Screw Attack being the last upgrade. But as always, you know, Screw Attack, it's an amazing power-up, you know, it's super fun to use, you're a near indestructible, invincible ball of energy that annihilates everything that it comes into contact with. You just destroy enemies, and I mean destroy enemies, it's amazing. And the best part is, if you have the skill to get this thing early, which I know speedrunners in the past have been able to do this, but if you get it early, SQ becomes an absolute joke with it because it has an extra functionality where if you attack enemies covered in electricity with the screw attack, it'll actually be able to damage them. So I think that's really fun, and, you know, just in general, it's a really pretty looking color scheme on top of a pretty powerful sound effect, and, man, I don't really have anything negative to say about this thing. I think it's just a high A, honestly. Like, it might even be S. Like, personally speaking, it might even be S, but for now, I'm just gonna put it at high A. Alrighty, we're now moving on to our final trio of items, and to begin our round out of items, we have the Cross Bomb. Really taking inspiration from Bomberman with this one, aren't you, Mercury's team? So the Cross Bomb, you get this in Gavaron after defeating Golzuna and its Core X. It even demonstrates a bit of the Cross Bomb in the fight itself, which I think is pretty neat. Kind of tying into the theme of the X-Parasites where they replicate the abilities of their host and show it off, just like in Fusion. So, the Cross Bomb, it's basically like a Bomberman upgrade where it shoots multiple explosions from the same bomb across. And, you know, as neat as it is, it comes a little too late and with too little uses to really make it fun and stand out, in my opinion. It has a little bit of involvement in puzzles, but there's not really too many to stand out or be memorable. But at the very least, bomb jumping is quite fun with it, and it's really fun to see how high you can go with just a single set. And infinite bomb jumping with it is especially easy because of how much height you get from a single set. And if you're really good at the game, like if you're a speedrunner, it has some pretty niche combat uses in the Ravenbeak fight because of how quickly you can use them. But I don't think anyone's gonna really be going for that unless you're a speedrunner or just a complete god at the game, so... It's still a quality of life upgrade though, so I can't knock it for that much, so I think I'm just gonna put it in B tier, just like the rest of these upgrades. Alright, moving on to the penultimate upgrade in Metroid Dread, we have the Wave Beam. So the Wave Beam, you get this in Ferenia after defeating the Wave Beam Emmy, which, if I'm being perfectly honest, is probably the second most annoying Emmy to deal with after the Speed Booster Emmy. I hate how this thing is just able to spot you through walls with no issue whatsoever. It's annoying. You get the Wave Beam fairly late in this game. It's a pretty late acquisition, kind of like in Fusion, meaning at this point it doesn't have a whole lot of uses, and especially in this game, it basically had a part of its functionality replaced by the Diffusion Beam, which kind of makes this almost redundant, but not entirely redundant, because there are some things in the walls that you can't get with Diffusion Beam, so it has that going for it, but for most of the game, Diffusion Beam just kind of takes its place, which I think is a bit of a shame, because I love the Wave Beam. So, Wave Beam... I love you, but I gotta put you in C tier, unfortunately. There's just not a whole lot of puzzles and exploration relating to this thing. It's really just a bit of a combat tool and a progression tool to get you to the end of the game, that's it. And last, but certainly not least, the final upgrade in Metroid Dread is the Power Bombs. So Power Bombs are also a bit of a classic item. They appeared in Super Metroid. They're the final power-up in the game, acquired in Hanubia after you, quote-unquote, defeat the Power Bomb Emmy. It's not really a defeat, it's more like you just suck its energy and then you fight a Chozo warrior after, and then you get the Power Bomb. It's a bit of a nutcase, honestly. Power Bombs, as the name suggests, it's a more powerful bomb, and in this game, you can especially feel it when it just nukes the fuck out of everything. I mean, this thing just destroys all of the stuff that's on the screen. Obstacles, enemies, whatever you want, it just destroys all of them. But unfortunately, just like the Cross Bomb, this thing comes a little too late, and this is the latest the Power Bomb is ever acquired in a Metroid game to my knowledge. But even though it does come a little late, screen nuking is always a good time, especially when it just one-shots most of the non-boss enemies. It doesn't have a whole lot of use in boss scenarios, especially because, you know, in this game, they programmed it in such a way where you can't use power bombs to defeat the upcoming bosses. But it does have a use in the Ravenbeak fight where you destroy this little sun thing that he shoots from his arm cannon. So there's some use there, but other than that, nothing really going on there in combat. But I love screen nukes. I love the way this thing just does it. I'm putting it in B tier. And there we go, that is my tier list of all of the Metroid Dread power-ups. What do you guys think of this tier list? Do you agree with it? Do you think there's some items that could be moved around a bit? Maybe some items moved up, some items moved down, some items shifted in terms of the tier? I don't really have much else to say, so as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next upload. Goodbye!